This is Paw Print, an animal rescue community, episode 112. I'm Nancy Rhee.
And I'm Harold Rhee.
Today's special episode features Dr. Kate Hurley's presentation, From One Sneeze to a Million Lives.
Dr. Kate Hurley is Program Director for the Koret Shelter Medicine Program for the University of California in Davis. She's also a co-founder of the Million Cat Challenge, which she'll discuss later in her presentation. She began her career in animal rescue as an animal control officer back in 1989 for the Santa Cruz SPCA. 6 years later, she began her medical career at the UC Davis School of Veterinary Medicine. Before we transition to her presentation, just want to give you some quick notes since you won't be able to see the visuals that she's referring to. First, she actually does a very nice job of painting the picture of a lot of the slides, so it's not necessary that you see them. She jokes about her obsession with orange cats, so in case you're wondering about why she keeps on talking about cats in a funny way or about the color orange, you'll know why. With that said, here's Dr. Kate Hurley.
I guess this is as dark as it gets, huh? A little hard to see the slides. But you can appreciate possibly how cute that cat is. So this is brought to you by the color orange. And my current foster cat, who I got last week at the Baldwin Park Shelter in LA County, and I don't know if you can tell, he has no islands. And he was sort of lurching around in his cage, and I was like, oh God, I think I'm in love already. So I smuggled him home in my purse, and now he's hanging out in my bedroom. He's the reason that I almost was late today, because like I walk in and he just collapses and purrs, and I can't do anything but pet him. And just a reminder, really to me, coming here today, about how like every animal is one of a million until you know it, and then every animal is one in a million. And my wish for our profession is that every animal has the chance to be the one in a million that it really is. And that every shelter, big shelters, small shelters, public, private, scrappy little rescue groups, in every community have the opportunity, have the know-how, have the legislative support and the community support to give every animal that chance. And I think that's why we're all here today, right? And I swear, I got here early, which is very unusual for me. I was out walking around, and I ran across this sign right across the street. So obviously, this was meant to be. But anyway, I've been at this conference, I think, since the first one. So, how many of you have heard me before? A lot of times. Sorry. But, you know, I've come here and I have droned on about upper respiratory infection and disinfectants and pan-luke and ringworm and feline leukemia and FIV and kennel cough. And I have beleaguered you with facts and figures and charts and science. And I decided to do a little different thing today and tell more of a story. And I hope this is useful for you. Because it's really a story about how when we keep reaching for a bigger solution, all those facts and all those figures suddenly become more relevant and more possible. And at the same time, all of those little things become easier and less necessary because we've solved the big problem that we're facing. So the title of this, I know you can't see real well, it's From One Little Sneeze to 1 Million Lives, Adventures with Feline Upper Respiratory Infection. And that's an amoxicillin tablet that I'm flinging. I'm not flinging it at the cat. There's green snot drops that I'm really flinging it at. And this has been like the story of my career. It's like just wielding this tiny little weapon against this huge, ubiquitous, like intransigent, problematic disease for cats in animal shelters. Another thing we could call this talk really is why I'm not a skydiver. It's really a talk about being wrong over and over and over for most of the last 26 years that I've been doing this. This is me wearing this same outfit because I struggle to dress myself. I'm a little wrinklier now. Aren't we all? Most of us are. And instead of combat boots, I have these sequin things that I got for a ballroom dance thing a little while back. But other than that, I really haven't changed much. Like, I am still kind of crazy about cats. And I still remember the pride I felt when I first put on this badge and went out there in the field and took on the role of animal control officer at the Santa Cruz SPCA. And it was a time where the model for sheltering and the model for the best way that we could respond to all the concerns around community cats was to be an open intake facility and to have no real management of cats coming our way, but just to go and like bring them to us. Don't call ahead to make sure there's room. Don't check to make sure we're going to be able to find a live outcome. But we'll go, I'd get them, I'd help people set traps, I'd get the cats out of the traps and bring them to the shelter, even though at the time, only 1 out of 4 cats left that shelter alive. And even though if the cat was feral or underage, it was my job to take it straight back to the euthanasia room and give it a lethal injection myself. And I did that for 6 years. And I did it even though I love cats so much. And I did it because I believed absolutely that it was the best way to serve all the causes I was committed to. Because when I put on this badge, I was committed not just to the cats right in front of me, but also to the community that I served and to the needs of the community members. I was the one who, when a neighbor got frustrated because a cat was walking on his car and shot the cat, I was the one who arrested that man. I knew the risks if we didn't respond and resolve people's complaints. I was the one who picked up the baby birds that cats killed. And I understood those risks as well. And I was as committed to protecting wildlife as I was to protecting cats. I was the one who picked up the cats that were hit by cars and attacked by dogs and the victims of cruelty and neglect. And I felt in my bones that bringing them to the shelter, doing our best to find them a home, and if we couldn't, giving them as humane a death as I could, was the very best thing I could do. And then there came a day, not too long into this, when I brought back to the shelter another litter of underage kittens. And, in the context of we couldn't find homes for them all, it didn't make sense. We didn't have a foster program, but I just couldn't do it. So I took them home. It wasn't this litter, but it looked a lot like this litter. And then there was 3 orange kittens and a calico, and being not very creative as well as not being able to dress myself, I named them Callie the Calico and small, medium, and large orange. And I raised them up until they were 8 weeks old. And then I brought them back into the shelter, and we had just little cages, and we had toilet seat covers. That was our decoration, and I picked ones that really offset their colors, and put little hearts and stars on their cage cards, and kissed them all and wished them well. And Callie, being kind of cute looking, she got adopted their very first day, and small and large orange got adopted within just a few days. And then about a week later, I walked into the euthanasia room, and medium orange was on the table. And he had started sneezing. And we didn't have a vet, and we didn't have an isolation ward. And we didn't have any way to treat a sick kitten without having disease spread to the rest of the shelter. And we knew if that happened, it would ruin our reputation in the community, and we would adopt out even fewer cats. And we had a rule that you couldn't question a euthanasia decision once it had been made. And so I didn't say anything to my friend who was going to euthanize my kitten. And I just walked out the door. And I can still remember standing outside the euthanasia room, and it was a sunny day, and dogs were barking, and people were hustling by. And the whole life of the shelter was going on around me. And I just stood there and I thought, there has got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way than this. And so, I took myself off to vet school. And I was like, I'm going to find that better way. I'm going to become that veterinarian that we don't have. I'm going to get myself that isolation room that isn't in our building. And no kitten is going to die in my care because she caught a cold. So I did it. This isn't actually me going to college, but I put it up here. I don't know if you can see, but there's a cat on my shirt, which I thought was portentous. And so I did. Graduated from vet school, got a job right away at a shelter, which was insane, but there was no such thing as shelter medicine in those days. There was no more training for me to have, so the best I could do was just like, I'm gonna go work at a shelter. And I worked in a nice new building, and I did have an isolation room, and I had techs, and I had drugs, and I broke out my amoxicillin, my doxycycline, and I treated those kitties. And then there came a day where my isolation room was full. And the hall was full of cats in crates with towels over them that also had URI that were waiting for a place in the treatment room. And stray was full, and adoption was full. And I had to decide, am I gonna euthanize the cats that just got sick and haven't even had a chance? Am I gonna euthanize the cats I've already invested a couple of weeks of treating in? Am I going to euthanize a perfectly healthy cat that's up for adoption? There has to be a better way. And so I called my infectious disease professor, Dr. Niels Peterson at UC Davis. And I was like, Dr. Peterson, I feel like I'm rubbing two sticks together out here and I need a flamethrower. And so he told me, that's hard, he told me about this new grant that he'd applied for at UC Davis by a little group called the Maddie's Fund. And I said, you know, if you get that grant, call me, because I will come and I will be the first resident. And I'm going to figure out the better way. And so y'all know how that went. You got the grant, he called me, packed up my things, moved back to California. I was in Wisconsin at the time. And there still wasn't any such thing as shelter medicine, but I had 3 years and all the time and space and knowledge of a university in front of me. And at that time, right around that time, the Association of Shelter Veterinarians got started, and so I cruised. It was actually just a cutout from the Shelter Veterinarian listserv of like topic, congested cats. What do we do? And then I could look at the research, like what are we treating with? What's the science? I actually went to England and I met with the professor who discovered herpes and calicivirus. And she shut down her lab and brought all her scientists in, and we spent the whole day talking about upper respiratory infection. And it was great. This is actually my research library on my computer. That's all the articles I have about fecal URI. And I was like, I got it now. I got it. I understand it. This is from one of my very first PowerPoints. It's called Grim Blue, because that's like all I could do with PowerPoints. But here's the list of the causes of acute feline upper respiratory infection and upper respiratory infection management tool. And I went on the road and I talked to people and I just battered them with facts and ideas and suggestions. This is just an excerpt, and the last slide on there is number 134, and that wasn't even the end. But I was so sure that knowledge was power, and that was all we needed. And then, like 8 years in, this article came out, and it spoke to what was still true in the field. And it just shows that by the time cats had been in that shelter for 2 weeks, there's a better than 80% risk that they had upper respiratory infection, just like Medium Orange did way back then. And even for shelters that didn't have to euthanize, that were able to treat, this was an unbelievable resource drain, an unbelievable cause of suffering for the cats in the shelter. Notice the color of the cat in all of these. So then I saw another notice about a grant opportunity This one from the Morris Animal Foundation for the Healthy Happy Cat campaign. So my colleagues and I applied for this grant. We came up with an ambitious project to investigate upper respiratory infection. And specifically, we were going to find out how much is out there and why. What can we change so that we're not responding to cats once they're sick, but we're stopping them from getting sick in the first place? And this was a lot of work. We sent out a questionnaire that had almost 50 questions about all the different factors we could think of that could possibly impact risk for upper respiratory infection. And then we tracked data from 9 shelters for an entire year. We got data on over 25,000 cases of upper respiratory infection and over 250,000 cat care days. And we found real dramatic differences. The shelter on the right, out of 184 cats, 49 developed upper respiratory infection. I know you can't see, but of their care days, just the overall time they spent caring for cats, they spent 1,400 days on well cats and over 700 days, over a third of their time, caring for sick cats. Whereas this other shelter, only 2 out of almost 90 cats got upper respiratory infection. And out of 2,600 care days, they only spent 21, less than 1%, on caring for sick cats. What was going on? Well, this gave us a little hint. We looked at the frequency of respiratory infection pathogens on intake at the different shelters to make sure it wasn't just healthier cats coming in. It wasn't. What it was a big difference in expression of the viruses once the cats were in the shelter. And this graph on your left shows the blue bar is herpes in healthy cats on intake, and the red bar is herpes on sick cats with upper respiratory infection. The other graph is the one shelter that was spending less than 1% of its time on sick cats. No difference in herpes virus frequency in sick cats and healthy cats on intake. Herpes was not being expressed in that shelter. What does that mean? Vets in the room. What did that tell us? Was it about disinfection? It was stress. Herpes is a stress-associated condition. It is the gift that keeps on giving. Cats are infected early in life because it's activated by pregnancy and nursing. And then they come in the door carrying it. And if we stress them, we turn it on. But what we saw is that it's possible to get a cat all the way in a shelter, through it, and out the door without ever turning on their herpes. So we put all that data into a big computer, and it made a grinding sound. It's like jiggling sound. And what popped out? The trick to not turning on herpes was giving cats greater than 8 square feet of floor space. Not 6 to 8 square feet. That wasn't good enough. It had to be more than 8. And they had to have limited movement in the first 7 days. You had to not have to take them out in order to provide daily care. And so that meant double compartment housing in the first week of care. And I know not all of you work in shelters, but this is so important just to know. No matter what else you do, we have to make this happen. So the shelter that I showed you that had the higher risk of upper respiratory infection, they looked at that data too, and they were like, you know what? We're going to do it. We're going to take out that cat housing, that dark dingy single cat housing. We're going to buy a modular unit. Some of you have seen the shelter. This is Sacramento SPCA. We're going to get some pretty nice housing, put it in there. Watch for the color of the cat. And you can see he actually has 2 of these. So he has a little litter box place, but then he's got one side and the other side. And then not long after, I got this email, and if you can just see, like there's cages here, there's cages here, there's cages on all 4 walls and another room. And we used to argue whether to cut it off at 50 cats or 75. And I got this email saying, never in my wildest dream would I have believed I'd see the day with 1 cat in feline sick bay. Today is that day. And that room has been empty since then, except for cats that just come in sick. So that was anecdotal. So we decided, let's just try this at our local shelter. And we were like, you guys, can we rip out some of your cages and put some bigger ones in? We think it'll work. And they were like, sure. So we did. This was their basic housing, just sort of standard 2x2-ish cage. We got Shoreline to make these. You've probably seen them since, but this was the first time they were ever made. It was designed for this study, also funded by the Morris Animal Foundation, where it was just about twice as big. So instead of about 2 feet wide, it's about 4 feet wide. It's got a side for the litter, then another compartment. Otherwise, we put all the same furniture and hiding boxes and all of that. So the cats were handled the same. They were put in at random, just odd numbers in one cage and even numbers in the other kind of cage. And then we checked out what happened. We actually videoed them and looked at their behavior in the first 24 hours in those cages. And this is behavioral expression in the large cage on your left and the small cage on your right. You can see the blue is neutral, and they're just like kind of hanging out in like in that little meatloaf pose that they do. So about half their time in neutral mode in both, but a huge amount of time, the rest of the time, in positive behaviors in the large cage, where almost no positive behaviors in the small cage. Almost all the rest of their time was spent hiding or struggling to get out, engaging in escape and vocalization behaviors and messing up their cages. And I'll just show you a close-up of what that sort of looks like. So this is one of the positive behaviors, which is somewhat relaxed. So it's meatloaf in the front, but lounging on the back. And over 70% of cats in the large cage exhibited that behavior compared to less than a third of cats in the small cage. And then this is really chilling out. That's lateral, and that's the sign of a really relaxed cat. And you can see there wasn't a lot of room to even assume that posture, but this cat has worked it out by like putting the lid of the feral box kind of between her legs, just like. But again, almost 70% of cats that exhibited that behavior in the large cage compared to less than 15% of cats in the small cage. And like just thinking about what does that mean, for cats that are spending their first day in what is likely to be the highest stakes and most difficult experience of their lives, where they're literally fighting for their lives. And just to be able to kind of relax, get some good rest. That's huge. And this is such a small thing, but such a big thing. Fewer than 50% of the cats in the small cages urinated or defecated in the first 24 full hours in the cage. And many of them also didn't eat, drink, or groom, whereas all the cats in the larger cages used the litter box, ate and drank, groomed themselves. That means a tremendous amount just for maintaining health, not getting ringworm, not picking stuff up, maintaining normal hydration and nutrition so they can respond to the vaccines that we give and the care that we're offering. And it's also just a huge flag for their well-being and their state of mind. So this is how it all panned out. We did this over a couple of years, actually, sort of taking out some cages and putting in some big ones, and then gradually we started cutting holes in things. And so over time, we went from having all small cages to some small, some large, to all large cages. This is the Yolo County Animal Shelter. And this is what happens. So the middle bars are during the times when we had some small and some large, and then the final bar is the time when we had all large. And this was percent of adult cats that developed URI. So you can see it dropped in about half as we transitioned to having all large cages. This was how many healthy and sick cat care days they spent. So we cut their capacity by half because we doubled the size of their cages. But they got away with it because the cats moved faster. So you can see the sick care days went down dramatically, but also the healthy care days, the blue bars, went down quite a bit. And this is how live release looked. Went from 30% to just over 50%. Not where we want to end up, but a whole lot better. And certainly the opposite of what we were afraid we would see with dropping their capacity would be compromising their live release in any way. And that's one of the reasons we went so cautiously and sort of tiptoed along. We're like, check it out, let's put in one more big cage, let's see what happens. And this really shows why. This graph shows the lines are the stress score day by day in the large versus the small cages. So the red line here is the stress score in the small cage, and the green line, you can see it actually started out a little higher, not statistically significantly different though, but dropped a lot lower. And right here is the line between tense and relaxed. So you can see the cats that started out in the large cages had hit relaxed by day 2. So all of a sudden we were like, hey, you're showing that you're adoptable. Or you're showing that you're not a good candidate for adoption. We're going to start making a different plan for you. Whereas for the cats in the small cages, even by day 7, well past their stray holding period, they hadn't shown themselves, for the most part, to be a friendly, relaxed, adoptable cat. And then the colored bars, the red bars, are cats that were euthanized out of the small cage versus cats that were euthanized out of the large cage. And so what we learned from that is just properly housed cats are happy cats, are healthy cats, are cats that leave shelters alive. And that was pretty cool to figure out. So we're like, oh, we're there, right? All we have to do is give shelters giant bags of money, and they can put in these glamorous cat spaces, and all the upper respiratory infection will be fixed, right? Or we could give them all unicorns that fart rainbows, because that is just as likely, right? So you're like, oh, back to the drawing board again. So Dr. Wagner is an erstwhile cow vet who works with our program, and she's very handy with tools and blow torches and plasma saws. And she figured out, well, if you can't buy new cages, it's actually not that hard to just cut a hole between 2 existing stainless steel cages. Originally, just put a piece of PVC pipe between the 2 of them. Now we've actually made this glamorous little door that you can put between the cages. It's got a little door and a little paw print on the door. You can get that for $65, and most shelters can come up with $65. And you'll quickly save more than $65 and reduce medical costs and reduce time caring for cats, because it's just a lot easier to deal with a cat when you can tuck it safely on one side, tidy up the other side of his house, move it over. There's no drama, there's no escapes, there's no biting. And notice the color of this happy, healthy, gorgeous cat. So you're like 2 cages plus 1 hole equals no mo URI. We're like, we like this math. So we wondered, does this really work in real life? And we got this email from a shelter that took the plunge about 6 years ago. Took a huge step, we cut holes in between cat holding cages, inserted PVC portholes, effectively doubling the space available to each cat, cutting the number of cages we had in half. This was in a brand new building, and they were a little nervous about doing this, but they had so much upper respiratory infection they didn't know what else to do. And cat isolation is empty today because our URI rates have plummeted. Now that the statistics for July are in, we found that our live release rate for felines in July was 70%, 2010 it was 54%. Yay! Yay! Are we there yet? Notice the color of the cat. I did not plan this. I only noticed it just now sitting out there while you were all getting cream puffs. Are we there yet? Are we going to finish 17 minutes early? Why?
We're still not sending out the other 30%.
We're not sending out the other 30%. We're still using a model where we're taking in more cats than we're able to rehome. At most shelters, in most communities, there's a shelter at least that is still using a model of taking in more cats than they're able to rehome. And so I got these emails that just broke my heart. And I got them all the time. Maybe they're from someone in this room. The shelter's at max capacity. I know we're euthanizing animals that arrived healthy and got sick due to overcrowding. We had a terrible December outbreak. Now we have widespread URI. Our staff is overwhelmed and exhausted. I have a board mandate to not euthanize for space, creating overcrowding. We end up euthanizing for disease. We're open admission, and our policy is to euthanize for illness or aggression, not for a time and space. Cats sick and get euthanized. And I found myself going on the road, urging people to euthanize for space as the more humane alternative to euthanizing for upper respiratory infection. But I have to think, like, is this me? Is that really what I want? There has to be a better way than choosing between euthanizing for URI and euthanizing healthy, beautiful cats for space. This poster actually hung in the lobby of the Santa Cruz SPCA. And we used to sit around, like, I picked that one. You know which one I picked, right? The truth is, it's against human nature and it's certainly against humane nature to choose among healthy cats or healthy dogs to euthanize. I can recommend it, but I can't do it myself. I can't walk into a ward of cats and say, let's euthanize these 3 because we got 3 more healthy ones coming in the door. That's why at the Santa Cruz SPCA 25 years ago we had that rule about URI, because it was easier to wait and just see who got sick. We can't do it. We're not wired that way, and certainly those of us who work in shelters are not wired that way. So this is from my grim talk of like, we need to euthanize for space. That's super grim blue. By the way, that's my PowerPoint theme for that one. And I had this little slide. It's like, more coming in than go out alive equals a problem. You could have a shelter that holds 100. You could have a rescue group. You could put 1,000 in your bathroom. You still have a problem if outflow alive doesn't equal inflow. So then, 2008, I was standing in the parking lot of Jacksonville Animal Services in Florida, and they had just started a new program. There weren't enough homes for all the cats. But if a cat came in, stray, unowned, in a trap or not, healthy, and it was one more than they could put into their adoption pipeline, or it was too feral to put in their adoption pipeline, instead of bringing it in at all, they put it on a van, it got sterilized, and it got put back to the home that it already had outside. And these were the lines we'd been looking at when we were looking at their data, because we came when they were only a few weeks into this program. Their euthanasia rate some years had exceeded, or some months had exceeded 100% because they were catching up from the month before. And then all of a sudden they started this program, and this is their live release rate. In a matter of months, going from under 10% to closing in on 80%. And I thought, could that be the answer at long last? By expanding our definition of homes, could we find enough homes for them all? When we recognize that there are cats that thrive in their outdoor home, in the community, where they live, and where most likely there's somebody who actually cares about them. San Jose City Animal Services was the first shelter to really go big on this in California, and a few years in, they published this that just made my heart sing. Association B, this is emerged from feral freedom to shelter neuter return, now often called return to field. Association between shelter neuter return and cat health at a large municipal animal shelter. And this is their euthanasia for upper respiratory infection, from 900 to less than 90 in association with this program. Are we there yet? We're really close. Not so fast, though, say the bird people, say the public health people, say the people like me who are concerned about the welfare of the cats themselves out and about in communities. What about all of that, right? One of the great things about being at the university is that I have the time and access to really read the literature with care. Not just the abstracts, but the whole thing. And as I looked at these programs unfold, I went back to the literature and I tried to answer that question, like, what about the birds? What about the risk to public health? What about the risk to cats? And I learned something from rereading things that I already read, which is that there is a minimum number of cats that have to be removed from a population to have any impact on overall cat numbers. And it is an absolute mathematical fact. And if you don't hit that metric, it doesn't matter, you can remove 1,000 cats or 1,000,000 cats. If that doesn't hit the mark of at least 50%, and in many cases in open populations, much, much higher, up to 90%, and simultaneously control any further breeding or immigration, it has no effect. It has no effect on the size of the population. It has no effect on the risk posed by that population to wildlife. It has no effect on the risk suffered by that population. And in fact, when we destabilize populations by removing adult animals, leave the carrying capacity environment intact, and allow more kittens to be born to replace those adult animals, kittens are both the highest risk for themselves, for suffering, and pose the highest risk for shedding infectious diseases and growing up to prey on wildlife. And this article came out just as these programs were emerging. It's actually sort of an anti-cat article. It's documenting the impact, the putative impact of cats on wildlife in the United States. But what came out of it was an estimate for the first time that I had seen of the number of unowned cats in the US. Who knows what it is? 30 to 80 million. We have to euthanize in a short time, in one breeding cycle, at least half, and then prevent any further immigration. Are we going to euthanize 15 to 40 million cats in the US? Never. It is not going to happen. We can completely set euthanasia aside as a tool for protecting cats, for protecting people, for protecting birds, for solving problems. It just doesn't work because we can't reach the scale. And when I did that math, I put my head down on my desk and cried at the system that I had invested in, at the cats that I had euthanized, in the absolute belief that it was helping when it was a meaningless drop in the bucket. And then I picked my head up and rejoiced, because I was like, this is outdoor pet cats. This is outdoor community cats. These are cats impounded and released alive, and these are cats impounded and euthanized in the United States. And I'm like, we can squish that piece of pie, and it won't make any difference to anyone's. Like, we can go to town. So this is the old model of all roads. You know, whatever your problem or concern or worry about a cat is shelter intake. And we think of open intake shelters as those that have to take all cats that come to them at all times of the day, night, or time of year, no matter what else is going on. But now that we know that that doesn't solve any problems, we can draw a new map where we save the shelter for those cats that really need it, and there are cats that really need it. For those cats whose habitat has just been destroyed. For those cats who are living close to an ecologically sensitive area. For those cats who have lost their owner, who truly can't keep the cat anymore, or who truly just doesn't like the cat anymore. That's fine. Give it to me. But then we can also place a balanced emphasis on all the other ways that we can serve all of those 30 to 80 million cats out there. Recognize that they're out there anyway, only a tiny fraction of them is coming into the shelter. So help people rehome that cat that they found, or that's their own pet that they can't keep. Help people raise that litter of kittens that they found instead of bringing it into a shelter with an overwhelmed foster care system. Help people figure out why the cat is peeing outside the litter box and solve the problem instead of bringing it into an overwhelmed shelter. Help people find the owner of that stray cat that they found. Help people by providing them with a humane deterrent so that they don't have to bring that cat into a shelter or shoot it. Solve the problem in a much more permanent and more humane way for both the person and the cat. So that seemed really hopeful. But I thought of my own reaction when I figured this out, and I read this article about are you familiar with the backfire effect? It's when new information challenges a core belief that's really intrinsic to your own identity. Instead of that new information changing the belief, it actually makes you discount the information and cling more tightly to your belief. We might have seen a little bit of this, like in November. Maybe. So I think we have to think about, like, how are we going to incorporate this new knowledge in a way that emotionally, like, our mental gears can actually accept. And I don't know about you, but I was so exhausted by just like the negativity and laying of blame and criticism in this field that I love and that we're all in together. And I see I can hear a few amens. And then I read about an interesting example from a parallel universe. And this is the world in which doctors and hospitals make mistakes that cost patients their lives. And that's a hard thing to admit. And it's especially a hard thing to admit that there might be some simple things that doctors and hospitals could do that would prevent those mistakes. And so I read about the 100,000 Lives campaign. It was in this book called Switch. Have y'all read Switch, How to Change When Change is Hard? Massively recommend this book because it's the story of our lives, right? And the goal of this campaign was to reduce deaths due to hospital mistakes. But it wasn't going to be a campaign driven by external critics. It was going to be a campaign from within the hospital industry. It was going to use 6 evidence-based, field-tested initiatives. Those weren't developed by the people who ran the campaign. They were developed by the people in the field, in the hospitals. Tried them out, figured out that they worked. And the goal of the campaign was just to connect hospitals to one another so that they could help each other implement those initiatives and learn more and then document the hope that came out of it and share that to inspire more hospitals to adopt those initiatives. They got voluntary participation by over 2,000 hospitals, and what they ended up creating was what they described as a peer-to-peer support group for healthcare improvement. They knew that the knowledge, the passion, the drive to prevent those deaths was already there. You don't have to force or bully or harass doctors to get them to try and save lives. You just got to give them the tools and the permission. And when the campaign was over, in 18 months, they had dropped mistake-associated hospital mortality by over 122,000 lives. So Julie Levy and I were doing some talks about cats around that time when we saw that, and we're like, if they can do 100,000, we can do 1 million. And that same little group, the Maddie's Fund, they stepped up, they fully funded the Million Cat Challenge. We launched it in 2014. We now have well over 1,000 shelters across North America, from the tip of Florida to the upper edge of Alaska and northern Canada in the Million Cat Challenge. And the Million Cat Challenge is built around some new math. It is not complicated. These are evidence-based, field-tested initiatives. The 100,000 Lives campaign had 6, but they had like 10 times as many staff, so we only have 5. But it's about making those 2 arrows balance. Asking the question whether it's an open intake shelter or a managed admission shelter, private shelter, no-kill shelter. Is coming into the shelter the best choice for this cat? Is this an underage litter that could just stay where it is with its mama, with some support, until it's a little bit older? Or could the person keep this cat after all, or find the owner without the cat coming in? So that's alternatives to intake. Then if the answer is yes, the next initiative is managed admission. If it should come in, should it come in now? Is today the right day when we're full? Or maybe it could come in next Monday because we have an adoption special going on Saturday, and so we'll have some open space. Or if it's feral and our veterinarian who does feral cats doesn't come in until Friday, well, don't bring it in on Monday, bring it in on Thursday. So just matching the timing with when the services are available and when the shelter has capacity. And then, and this is my favorite one, right there in the middle, capacity for care. We know cats have to have enough room. Staff has to have enough time to provide good care for them. Otherwise, they'll get sick, they'll stay longer, and fewer cats can be served over time. So it's making the absolute commitment for every cat, every day, to provide humane housing and to make sure that staff has enough minutes to take good care of that cat and give her what she needs. And then on the other end, recognizing that people who are going to get cats are going to get cats. So let's remove every barrier to getting a cat that's spayed, neutered, vaccinated, microchipped, and comes with a friendly contact with an animal welfare organization, whether rescue group or shelter. So if there are any problems, they have somewhere to go. And being even more assertive about adopting into the homes that we worry most about, because we know they're going to get into the most trouble if they end up getting an intact cat. But also opening the door to recognize that a home is not the right choice for every cat. And so opening up that other option, if the cat came in healthy and was unowned, sterilize it, ear tip it, vaccinate it, put it back to just go on eating whatever food it was eating, stabilize cats out in the community, and not allow more kittens to be born. Reduce the overall population, overall, as well as reducing euthanasia in the shelter. Are we there yet? We're darn close. And I started this really because I just didn't want to see kittens die because they got a cold. But this is an email that I got from someone about just the impact beyond upper respiratory infection. Our cat adoption rate, and it was originally an email about URI, but just some of the other effects. Our cat adoption rate went from 990 to 1,342. Our save rate went from 52 to 82%. As for staff sanity, I can't speak enough about how it changed our world. To be completely honest, I was nearly emotionally exhausted, and so was my beloved intake team. We were burnt out. Just the idea of the transition gave us all a reason to hold on. And then when we started seeing results, we all have a newfound vigor for our work. This is an open intake shelter that went to managed admission, basically, and remained open intake. I recently presented our annual report to our volunteers, and they were literally crying tears of joy at what we've accomplished. So it started with a sneeze, but it ended up being a whole lot bigger than that. And so I checked the million cat counter today, and as of this morning, the promise that I made to Medium Orange has been kept, 761,047. And I haven't tried this, but this is the part where I strip down. Because finally, it's not just a promise that I made to that cat, but it's really a promise that I made to my own 24-year-old self. And so it's no coincidence that the badge for the Million Cat Challenge is right here in the same place as that badge that I put on 25 years ago. And it stands for the same commitment to the cats, to the communities, and to all the animals that we serve. And here's the really cool thing about it. I didn't keep the promise at all. It never was up to me. It was kept by all of you, by everyone in this room, by all the people who spoke today, by all the work that all your organizations and all the people like us are doing across North America. Koret County, I think you recognize yourself there?
Yes, yes, I do.
So, when Julie and I were at Expo in 2013, and this was just first a twinkle in our eye, this idea. I happened to see this on Facebook, and I took a screenshot, and I saved it on my phone. And it says, "It's impossible," said pride. "It's risky," said experience. "It's pointless," said reason. "Give it a try," whispered the heart. And I thought, one of these days, I'm going to stand up in front of an audience and say, we did it. And so I want to invite you now to take that little card I gave you and just listen to your heart for a minute, to what it's whispering to you right now. It could be what brought you to this conference. It could be something that you learned today. It could be something that has nothing to do with cats or dogs. It could be something for the environment or for people. It could be that you want to learn to play the tuba. I just want you to think about it for a second and then write it down on the back of that card.
This will go on for just a few more moments, so bear with us.
I have a bunch of pens if you don't have. I understand you have them in your bag. When you're done, just want to invite you to look around at the other good people in this room. Think about all the time that has been taken today and the reason that we're all here. Think about the people in your organization who are back at the ranch holding down the fort. Think about all the people that make up our profession, but also all the other good people in your lives who are working to make this world a better place. The people who love you and who support you. And think about that dream that you have. And I encourage you to take that leap and let us all be your trampoline. Thank you.
We just want to say thank you to Dr. Kate Hurley for sharing her story and for her incredible presentation, From One Sneeze to a Million Lives. If you'd like to learn more about this presentation, go to our show notes at thisispawprint.com/112. That's the number 112. We include some photos of Dr. Hurley, as well as Dr. Hurley holding one of her cats. We want to say thank you to Tony LaRussa's Animal Rescue Foundation. Elena Bicker is the executive director. Sally Wortman is the clinic director. And as usual, Tony LaRussa's Animal Rescue Foundation, first-class job with their army of volunteers. So thank you. Stay tuned for our next episode where we feature Rose and Jimmy Hunter of the House of Ig. Ig as an iguana. Can't wait for you to listen to our episode featuring some rockin' reptiles. Can't believe we've made it now to 112 episodes, so we just want to say thank you for your support. And remember, you spread a positive message of love and peace by saving an animal. Have a great day, everyone, and see you next time on Paw Print.
is a production of EVER Education.
You can't handle the truth.